Today is Wednesday, April 17th, day 3 of a criminal trial unlike any other in American history. But that's just one of the headlines that we're following for you today. In this edition of Political Update, I'm Tim Darnell, joined by our political reporter, Doug Reardon. Our stream, as always, is produced by Maria Moreau. And these are some of the headlines that we're following for you today, April 17th, 2024. Donald Trump was in Atlanta last week and literally set the social media world ablaze with his trip to a local iconic Atlanta restaurant. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones is being investigated for his role as an alleged fake elector in 2020. Georgia Congresswoman, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and House Speaker Mike Johnson are again at odds with each other. A major change here in Fulton County as the elections board chairperson has resigned, and finally, as I said at the very beginning, Donald Trump is on trial. Facing a criminal trial, the first time in American history, a former president has faced a criminal trial, this one happening in New York City. But Doug, returning to what we talked about at the top of the hour, or at the top of our stream, I should say, Donald Trump was in Atlanta last week, held a very private, very exclusive fundraiser at the St. Regis Hotel in Midtown Buckhead area. But before he made his way to the fundraiser, he stopped at a local Chick-fil-A in Vine City, not far from the Fulton County Jail, where he had his infamous mugshot taken. You were there for the entire event.
Yeah. 1.7 miles away from the Fulton County Jail by my calculation there at the Vine City Chick-fil-A when we were out there, but it was a surprise stop. We knew he was coming here for that really swanky event at the St. Regis in Buckhead for a big fundraiser that included big Georgia names like former Georgia congresspeople Kelly Loeffler, David Perdue, and a couple of other big, really wealthy names on that list too. But like you said, before he got there, we were in the motorcade with the president, former president, when he was made that surprise stop at that Vine City Chick-fil-A. He walked in, greeted the staff. There were probably a couple dozen people in there already, curated guests who knew the president was going to be making a stop there, and he handed out some milkshakes. Former President Trump walked in, said hi to everybody. It was probably about a 10 to 12 minute stop total. He got to talk with some voters and organizers. This location also was very close to Atlanta's cluster of historically black colleges and universities, so a lot of the people there who were there to greet him were black voters who said they had organized for Trump in the past. So he was just kind of mucking it up with people for a couple of minutes before he headed out to that fundraiser in Buckhead, and we headed back to the airport where we had met him earlier in that day. I came in on that plane bearing his name, and it was really his second stop in Georgia since being the presumptive or the official nominee. He was here a couple of weeks ago holding a campaign rally in Rome. The closest thing that he got to any sort of rally while he was here this time around was that stop at the airport. Otherwise, that fundraiser was very much off limits and very much a private event.
And the fact that he did stop at the Chick-fil-A and had a very amazing rapport with the customers and the staff, and I think that's what really set the world of social media, kind of on fire, because this is an audience that, traditionally Democrats have courted. We all know that the African American vote is a cornerstone of any Democratic Party success. I want to toss to your package right now, and let's hear your report on everything that happened when Trump was in Atlanta.
Former President Donald Trump landed at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport Wednesday, his first time back in the Peach State since he unofficially secured the GOP nomination.
There has never been anybody that's damaged our country like crooked Joe Biden. So I predict November 5th, the most important day in the history of our country, and it's going to be Christian Visibility Day.
He took aim at President Biden and Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who indicted the former president last year.
I suspect that case is going to be terminated because it has absolutely no credibility.
His motorcade made a pit stop at the Chick-fil-A in Vine City.
Hello, everybody.
He handed out milkshakes and discussed the polling numbers.
Our polling is very good in the state of Georgia overall.
Then it was off to the St. Regis in Buckhead for a major fundraiser. The flyer shows couples were charged $6,600 for entry, even $25,000 for a picture with the former president. The media was not invited in, but Atlanta News First spoke exclusively with one of the organizers, former U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler.
We are the battleground state.
She's founder of the campaign organization Greater Georgia and a top donor to the former president.
Georgians realize that they're paying unprecedentedly high prices at the grocery store. The gas pump prices are 40% higher than when President Trump was in office. And now we've got an open border and sadly the murder of Laken Riley in Athens, Georgia.
Political action committees have spent millions on Trump's legal fees, but Loeffler says that does not deter the former president's base.
Every time President Trump gets indicted, his polling goes up because Americans see what's happening.
Carly Barnett, Atlanta News First.
That was Doug Reardon, who has joined with us today here at the First Alert Desk, reporting on Donald Trump's visit to Atlanta last week. And Doug, some news that broke shortly after the former president, was in Atlanta for the fundraiser. One of his most ardent supporters here in Georgia, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, was announced to be under investigation for his alleged role as a quote-unquote fake elector in the 2020 presidential election. This election, obviously, we all know, saw Democrat Joe Biden become the first Democrat in recent memory since really 1992 to carry Georgia or any other deep southern state in a presidential election. We are all well aware of the alleged scheme in which several Donald Trump supporters were alleged to have gathered in preparation to file false certifications of election, calling Georgia's 2020 presidential election for Donald Trump. Burt Jones allegedly was one of those. Talk to us a little bit about this dynamic relationship.
Yeah, well, just to kind of lay the groundwork for what exactly the charges are, Jones and several other people, including some people that are current indictees in the actual case itself out of Fulton County, that includes former GOP state chair David Schaefer, current sitting state senator Sean Still. Those people, as well as others, met shortly after the election took place and the results were finalized to try and cast electoral votes to give Georgia 16 electoral points to Donald Trump instead of Joe Biden. They had tried to submit false documents allegedly to the National Archives saying that Trump had won the state, not Biden. This was something that took place in a number of other states as well, and some of those people are also facing charges. And so Jones was being considered very heavily as a potential indictee in this case, right up until District Attorney Fani Willis in Fulton County threw a fundraiser for the man who was running against her for the lieutenant governor job, Charlie Bailey, someone that she had come up in the legal circuit with and knew very well, and they were very good friends, and so she threw him a fundraiser, and it was decided that that created a conflict to the point where Willis could not be the one to prosecute Burt Jones, the lieutenant governor. He ended up winning that race and becoming lieutenant governor, but Willis was barred from prosecuting him in this indictment because of that conflict. And so Jones's case kind of fell into a little bit of an abyss here. It was passed off to the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia, which is a body that a lot of people aren't familiar with, but they kind of oversee the way that prosecutors, district attorneys do their jobs. They are kind of a guiding and oversight body for those individuals, and so they took the case over to mull whether or not Jones would have to face charges for that role that he played as an alleged fake elector. And what happened this week was essentially Pete Skandalakis, the leader of that board, said that they will be the ones prosecuting it. They have been looking for a number of district attorneys, local prosecutors to try and take on just that one indictment, but really they got not a lot of volunteers, and the people that they did get, they decided were not the right fit to potentially prosecute this case. And so a lot of people are saying that because this stayed with the Prosecuting Attorneys Council of Georgia, it may not get done. There's a statute of limitations coming up in December, and so they have to make moves relatively relatively quickly if they want to charge Jones with anything. Otherwise, that statute's going to expire and Jones is going to be able to walk free. So we are on a bit of a deadline, and we will have some more news on this very soon. A lot of people are speculating that because they went through all this trouble to try and find an independent prosecutor and then didn't, and ended up keeping the case with the Prosecuting Attorney's Council of Georgia, that they may not go ahead with charges. But again, that's just speculation at this point.
Well, the lieutenant governor is almost certainly to be on the ballot in 2026. He's been widely rumored to be mulling a gubernatorial candidacy a couple of years from now when Governor Brian Kemp's term expires, something we're going to keep an eye on. And also another issue currently in the headlines regarding another very prominent Georgia supporter, Donald Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene, the popular yet very controversial congresswoman from Georgia's Northwest 14th Congressional District, remains constantly at odds with House Speaker Mike Johnson, most recently over a package that the House Speaker is reaching across the aisle to Democrats for support, that including a package of aid, monetary aid, financial aid to Ukraine in its war against Russian aggression. We do have a report from Julia Benbrook from CNN on this issue.
Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene sent a searing letter to her Republican colleagues on Tuesday, outlining her case against House Speaker Mike Johnson. She accuses Johnson of failing to deliver on promises he ran on and breaking legislative procedural rules. She also claimed she would, quote, not tolerate Johnson's push to provide more aid to Ukraine, something he had voted against before he became Speaker.
If Mike Johnson wants to lead that after he voted no against funding $300 million to Ukraine just back in September, he's going to make my case for me, and he makes it even easier for what I'm trying to do.
Her threat to bring the motion to vacate to the floor looms, but Greene refuses to outline her plan.
I'm not laying out my red lines, my triggers, a date, and a giant headline.
While a few House Republicans have voiced frustrations with Johnson, several are jumping to his defense, speaking to the complicated nature of leading with a razor-thin majority.
I think Speaker Johnson is working his guts out, doing the best he can with a lot of feral cats.
For his part, Johnson has tried to downplay the threat and is attempting to ease tensions.
Marjorie and I don't disagree, I don't think, on any matter of philosophy. We're both conservatives, but we do disagree sometimes on strategy and with regard to what we put on the floor and when.
Reporting in Washington, I'm Julia Benbrook.
Doug, we heard that report from CNN. The whole dynamic relationship between Marjorie Taylor Greene and Mike Johnson is just fractious at best, and this controversy came well before this past weekend's events when the Iranian National Guard, or Revolutionary Guard, launched a fairly significant attack against Israel. We know that the House Republican Party seems to be pretty well united in its support of Israel. Who knows how this issue is going to affect the relationship between House Speaker Mike Johnson and Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah. Well, it certainly won't help. And now Greene actually has an ally on her side in her chamber, and that is Kentucky Representative Thomas Massie, who said he would support an ouster of Speaker Mike Johnson for the same reasons that Marjorie Taylor Greene is asserting that he is supporting Democratic causes, even though there have been lots of Democrats and Republicans who have stood up and said, we will support Mike Johnson if you bring this ouster effort against him. So it really doesn't have a lot of support. Greene's making a lot of noise right now, but doesn't really have any numbers to be able to back up this attempt to oust the speaker, which, by the way, I'll remind you, is only a thing because when Kevin McCarthy was trying to win back his speakership, he made concessions that a single member of the House could bring a vote to oust the sitting speaker. And so that's why we're here in the first place, is because of concessions that Taylor Greene had fought for when McCarthy was trying to win back his seat several months ago. That was not a standing rule before that fight went down. And so the other thing I think that's important important to note, too, is we mentioned that Taylor Greene is a big supporter of former President Donald Trump, but even Trump is supporting Johnson at this point, and Taylor Greene doubled down, even knowing that Donald Trump does not support her ouster effort, saying that she is still behind it, she is still going to try to make it happen, but she does not have the support of former President Trump and the current GOP nominee for president on her side, so that's going to be a tough lift, certainly, as goes Trump, as goes the Republican Party, so very good chance that this will end up going nowhere, but it certainly is getting a lot of attention.
Certainly is getting a lot of attention, and also we all know with the 2024 election only months away, Fulton County will be front and center of Georgia's 2024 presidential campaign right now, seemingly between the two presumptive nominees for the Democratic and Republican Party, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump, respectively. We had an interesting development happen very recently in Fulton County where the chairperson of the Board of Elections resigned and is taking a job with the city of Atlanta. And I want to play your report and your package on that before we come back and talk about it.
We had already done so much as a board to prepare for the election. I'm going to be sad that I'm not going to see it through.
But instead, Patrice Perkins Hooker felt called to take a job as attorney for the city of Atlanta, leaving her post at the helm of the Fulton County Board of Elections open. But Perkins Hooker said even with a primary election a month away, voters won't notice a difference.
And I agreed to stay on and serve as chair until the successor is designated, so there will not be a gap.
Perkins Hooker, an accomplished attorney, spent her time at the Elections Board cutting down on polling lines and expanding early access to the ballot. Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitt says she'll be missed, but there's no time to waste finding a replacement.
We're prepared for the world to be watching how we conduct this election. We're prepared.
Pitt says the commission plans to nominate replacements at their full meeting next week on Wednesday, April 17th. He knows who he'll be nominating, Kathy Woolard, who held the elections chair position before Perkins Hooker took over last May.
And here's a person, done the job before, been there, done that, Kathy Woolard.
On top of the upcoming primary, the nation will also take to the polls in November for a 2020 presidential rematch between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. 4 years ago, the race came down to Georgia, and Pitt knows all eyes will be on the state's votes this time around, too.
The world is going to be watching Fulton County again.
Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
Now, as I understand from recent reports, it seems as if Kathy Woolard, a former Atlanta City Councilwoman and former candidate for mayor, has been tapped, at least temporarily, to take over the Fulton County Board of Elections and Registrations. Am I correct?
That's right. That is what Chairperson Rob Pitts told us when we interviewed him for that story. Excuse me. And there's actually a vote today, or a meeting today, of the Fulton County Commission where they're going to put their names behind votes and nominations. And Pitts, having the role as the chairperson, did tell me he's going to nominate Kathy Woolard, who served in that chair position before Patrice Perkins Hooker got on the job about a year ago. And so she knows what she's doing. Pitts told us that. I mean, she ran elections here in Fulton County for many, many years. And so she's certainly familiar with the processes. Pitts told me that there is just simply no time with this election coming up, this primary on May 21st, and then the general election in early November, for people to do any on-the-job training. They need someone who knows what they're doing, and that is Kathy Woolard, he said. And so he'll be nominating her at today's commission meeting, and we'll certainly see how that plays out. We expect it to go well into the afternoon with them discussing who should be taking this over, but they do need to fill that position. We do have an election coming up here on May 21st, and so someone needs to be at the helm of the Fulton County Elections Board of Elections.
Well, Fulton County is also the site where former President Donald Trump is still facing a number of indictments, along with 13 of his remaining co-defendants, all alleged to have played a part in attempting to overturn Georgia's 2020 presidential election. As I said at the top of the stream, Donald Trump is now the first American ex-president in history to be on trial for criminal charges. This is happening in New York City, in the borough of Manhattan, where locally elected District Attorney Alvin Bragg has filed 34 felony counts of business falsification felony charges against Donald Trump, alleging that the former president and his now former attorney and prosecution star witness Michael Cohen engaged in an attempt to cover up crimes that were allegedly related to a series of hush money payments to Stephanie Clifford, aka Stormy Daniel, known by her adult entertainment stage name. I recently conducted an interview with Andrew Jennings. He is the Associate Professor of Law at Emory University, where he's talking about what we can really expect in the first few days of this trial. And as always, we encourage you to stay on top of all of Atlanta, Georgia, and the nation's political headlines every Wednesday at 1:30 here from the First Alert Desk at Atlanta News First.
This case is about a number of financial transactions that Mr. Trump engaged in 2016 and subsequently from his election as president, involving hush money payments to an adult actor named Stephanie Clifford, also known by her stage name Stormy Daniels. The hush money payments were intended to cover up the affair that Mr. Trump had in the early 2000s with Ms. Clifford while he was a married man. This is a story that comes out in the wake of the Access Hollywood video that we're all probably familiar with. And in this case, Trump paid Ms. Clifford for her silence through his attorney, Michael Cohen, and wanted to cover up the fact of these payments, didn't want to perhaps disclose these payments on campaign finance disclosures, for example. And so this case is really all about the falsification and the cover-up of the hush money payments to Ms. Clifford. It's the classic case of it's the cover-up, not the crime. Judge Juan Marchand, the presiding judge in this case, issued to the parties his jury questionnaire. And so next Monday, the trial will start with jury selection, and that could be a fairly long process. Justice Marchand has tried to streamline that process. He's worked with his court administrative staff, with court security, with the Secret Service to try to streamline that process as much as possible. But starting next Monday, the judge and the defense and the assistant district attorney will go through a process called voir dire to select a jury of citizens of New York County in New York. Well, this trial won't last until the end of the year, but it will last approximately 6 weeks. And so whenever we're talking about being away from your family, your other obligations, your work for 6 weeks, that is a burden on jurors. And the mere fact that being away for 6 weeks from your day-to-day life is a burden won't be enough to excuse potential jurors who might be selected for the jury. So there's that burden that any juror in a longer trial might have, whether it's civil or criminal. This case raises additional sensitivities for jurors. They are jurors who will sit in judgment in the first criminal trial of a former U.S. president. Former U.S. president who has shown that he's willing to make incendiary comments about the judicial process, comments that have subjected judges, court staffs, their families, etc., to death threats, to needing to leave their homes. So this potential for exposure, for threats of violence or actual violence probably would weigh on the minds of jurors. One way that the court is trying to avoid these problems is to require that jurors be anonymized. They won't be referred to by name, only be available to defense counsel and certain other parties or those who are helping the parties. Mr. Trump himself will not be given access to their names or their addresses, which is really an incredible prophylactic measure that a court might need to take to protect jurors from a former president of the United States. But these are the unique pressures that these jurors will be under. This is a criticism of this case that we hear from a lot of different quarters, including the former president, that isn't this just a record-keeping case? Why are we making the first trial of a former president, the first criminal trial of a former president, over errors or false entries in corporate ledgers or false checks, for example? I think that the assistant district attorney or the district attorney's office or other law enforcement agencies throughout the country would point to record keeping as really being the first step toward committing more substantive, more serious crimes. Record keeping really facilitates in a lot of ways carrying out complex illicit activity, and this was a pretty complex operation to hide these hush money payments and to reimburse the lawyer who made the initial payment over time, disguising those payments to look like they were legal fees as opposed to just reimbursement for hush money payments. But record-keeping violations matter because record-keeping enables those who want to violate other laws to do so, or to conceal the fact that they have violated other laws. And so this is really kind of a gatekeeping sort of offense in which if we don't have false business records being created, those records can't facilitate further criminal activity. And so that's why that's an important statute in New York, a city where there are many complex businesses. There are lots of opportunities for record keeping to perhaps facilitate illegal activity. And that's why this is an important issue and an important enforcement area for the district attorney in New York. The statutes that former President Trump has been charged under require proving a few things. First, they must prove that Mr. Trump falsified business records or he caused business records to be falsified. For example, he signed a check that was labeled for legal expenses when he knew that, in fact, it was a reimbursement for hush money payments. Or he caused entries into the Trump organization's ledgers that falsely reported the nature of payments to Michael Cohen, his lawyer, whom he was reimbursing for making these hush money payments. So first, the district attorney has to prove falsification. It must also prove that that falsification was done with some intent to defraud some person. And because this is a felony charge, under the felony provision of this statute, the district attorney will also need to prove that the falsification with an intent to defraud was meant to carry out or conceal some other crime. For example, violations of campaign finance law, violations of New York election law, violations of New York tax law. So those will be the things that the district attorney will have to prove. And you're exactly right that the burden is on the people. It's on the district attorney to prove those things. Well, given that the burden is on the people, in theory, the defense needs to do nothing. It needs to put the district attorney to its paces to prove its case. But in theory, the defense needs to do nothing. Now, of course, I would expect that Mr. Trump's attorneys will mount a vigorous defense. Will make arguments to rebut the theory that the district attorney is going to present. At this point, we don't really have a clear preview of what the district attorney expects to do in terms of the theories that they're going to present, the overall picture, the story that they want jurors to hear. But as a general matter, we would probably expect the defense to poke holes in the evidence that the prosecution will present. For example, Michael Cohen, Mr. Trump's former attorney, estranged former attorney, who went to prison himself in connection with this scandal under federal charges, is going to be the star witness for the people. Mr. Cohen is an admitted liar. He would argue that he lied for Trump, but he's an admitted liar. So we would expect the defense to probably work really hard to undermine his credibility, Mr. Cohen's credibility, in front of the jury. And so that's something that the prosecution will probably be expecting. And so there will be a lot of back and forth over just how credible Mr. Cohen is, because he really is, in a lot of ways, the star witness to the people's case. I'll be looking very closely at two elements of this crime and how the district attorney seeks to prove those elements. First is that any falsification of business records was done with an intent to defraud. I'll be looking to see how the district attorney is going to prove that, and I think we'll probably get some indications during its opening statement. And then second, how the district attorney will prove what theory it will offer as to that third element, the intent to commit or conceal another crime. That's what I'll be looking for in this case. And of course, any trial involving Donald Trump will have some twists and turns as well. So I suspect that there will be some news to break over the next 6 weeks in terms of gag orders or statements Mr. Trump makes outside of the courtroom or other items that might pop up as well.